Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thanks for your introductions today. Nice to meet you all. Hopefully, we should be able to fit this in with an hour. We'll see how we get on, and hopefully it'll be a little bit more enjoyable than Boris's press conference on Saturday. So, let's get started. So, I guess I want to just sort of paint a bit of a picture to begin with as to why this is worth talking about and thinking about. So each of you has a brand, whether you like it or not, you have a brand. It could be the difference between winning a customer and losing them, and ultimately business success or failure. So with that in mind, I think it's worth thinking about. It's worth investing time and energy and thought into. Why wouldn't you pay attention to it and make sure that your branding is fit for purpose? So that's kind of just to set the scene, really. Branding undressed. There's a lot of complication in the world of brand and branding. I'm immersed in it every day, and some days I find stuff and I just think that's nonsense. Naked, we're all about simplifying things. We want to make things clear for people, make things understandable. We find that's where the best ideas come from. So I want to do the same today with brand and branding. So I just want to quickly ask everybody, what are your ideas? What do you think brand is? What do you think branding is? Do you see a difference? If anyone wants to kind of chip in with what they think we're talking about. Don't be shy.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself.
I'll start. I'll be brave.
Go on, Sarah.
I think it's all about what you've got, an internal and an external brand. So your internal brand is about your culture and how you do stuff. Your external brand is how you communicate that to the world.
And what about branding as opposed to brand? Do you see a difference there?
I don't, but I'm guessing there is because you've put both of them on the slide. But I have no more sage thoughts right now.
Anybody else, or shall I start to try and make it clearer?
Go for it.
Sorry, is it to do with the way you're like branding itself? Is the way you, I guess, process that communication out to the world?
Yeah, exactly that. It's the branding is kind of the discipline of, like you say, communicating things about your business to the world. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways in which you do that and some of the considerations when doing that. So with a brand, we've probably all heard this, it's been said a lot, but what I really like about this quote from Jeff Bezos from Amazon, the thing I like about this is it really communicates the idea that your brand is something that lives in the minds of other people. It's not really something you control. It's other people's thoughts and feelings about your business. So you can't control them, but you can try to influence them. So that's why I've picked this quote. You might have heard it, but I do like it. It demonstrates that idea. Some brands are very divisive. Some brands you almost have tribes, and they are aggressive, like followers are aggressive with other brands, and some are very united in the perceptions they create. So John Lewis, for instance, everybody loves John Lewis, but you know what you're going to get from John Lewis. Everybody has similar expectations and perceptions of John Lewis. That's because they invest a lot of time and energy into their brand, and they create a very consistent level of experience through any dealings with their brand. So a brand is emotions, thoughts and feelings that we have about a business or organization. They're based on our own judgments and experiences. So that's why everybody has a different idea of a brand. You know, if I buy some jeans, I might buy Levi's because of what I feel about that brand, whereas somebody else might think of Levi's and not like that brand because of their own feelings towards it. So it's very much individual. It's very much in our heads. That's what I mean when I say you just can't control it. So can't control it, but you can try to influence it, and that's where branding comes in. So when we talk about branding, you said it's that communication about your brand. It's how you portray yourself. It's we call it's your brand's look and feel. I find that's quite an easy way just to think about it. It's how you look, it's how you sound, it's your personality, it's how your brand presents itself. And it can have a direct influence on the way people think and feel about your brand. And it can have an influence on how people talk about you when you're not in the room. So coming back to that Jeff Bezos quote. So part of branding is to create, design, a set of recognizable assets that kind of trigger thoughts about your brand. So when you see one of these assets, you immediately think about the brand, what it stands for, whether you like it, whether you trust it. So for instance, one of those assets is a logo, an icon, a symbol. We all know what this logo, icon, symbol represents. It doesn't need a company name. We know it's Apple. We instantly think of innovation, technology, and doing things differently. So you've got logo, you've got colors. So does anybody recognize this? Can anyone associate this to a well-known brand?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, exactly. So we don't need a product on there. We don't need a logo. But all we really need is a red and white. And so much so, I think Coca-Cola invented Santa Claus, didn't they? They made him red and white. So you've got logos, you've got recognizable colors. You can have a font. This could be any logo, or this could be any word written in the Disney font, and I would say you would probably associate it to Disney. It's a very recognizable typeface. And then you've got imagery style or design style. So I've used Red Bull here. The Red Bull adverts all use this quite unique style of illustration. As soon as you see an advert with that style of illustration, you instantly know it's Red Bull. And on the same token, the can has a very unique packaging design. And as soon as you see that on a shelf, you instantly know that's Red Bull, and you instantly start to associate it with the whole world of energy drinks and that sort of thing. So you can have a unique and distinguishable design style. You can have a slogan or a strapline. We all know this is Nike, but there's not a Nike logo anywhere on it. It's branding through a really strong strapline. You might not recognise this, but we've all probably walked past it in Chapel Field in Norwich, or Chantry Place, as it's now called, in Norwich. The Hollister store, we've all walked past it, and you get an overwhelming whiff of the Hollister perfume that comes out. So you can even do branding just by smell. And I'm going to try and get this to work. You might have to listen out to it. There's also sound as well. So did everyone hear that? Mm-hmm. So just that little jingle, you know that's McDonald's. Even if it's just subconsciously, you know that's McDonald's. I'm going to stop that playing so it doesn't keep going. Okay, so they're kind of the different assets that you can create, design, that you can associate to your brand that instantly make people recognize your brand just by seeing or hearing or smelling them. They become recognizable on their own. And they're so successful because they're used so consistently, repetitively. Brands have really committed to these assets and stuck with them. Constantly changing them just creates confusion and almost a sense of mistrust. You need to really be consistent with this and build up that trust and recognition. But at the same time, you need to be quite clever and evolve them so that you're sticking to the fundamentals without completely reinventing them, but evolving them keeps a little bit of newness in there. So it's a delicate balancing act, but it can be done. So that's all great, but why is it important fundamentally? You know, we're all thinking from a business point of view. Why do I need to worry about this? Well, in the first instance, branding can get you noticed. Good branding can make you stand out from the crowd, even if when fundamentally what you do is exactly the same as somebody else. We'll talk about innocent smoothies later and how branding has stood them out from the crowd. It can create feelings and perceptions based on the instant judgments we make when we see a brand. When I first encounter branding, is that brand high enough quality? Is it professional? Do I trust it? Or is it modern or cool enough for me? It's human nature to make these judgments and perceptions, and that's not going to change, I'm afraid. It can be, you know, these judgments can be the deciding factor between a customer, an employee, you know, your talent, choosing you over your nearest competitor. You can be the very, very best firm of financial advisors around. You can be the very best at what you do, but at the end of the day, if you don't look and feel professional, you're going to struggle to attract customers, and it's going to limit your business potential. So our first impressions create judgments. Once a judgment has been made, you have to work twice as hard to overcome that judgment. So let's not do that. Let's eliminate it. Let's make the right first impression, and let's do that with our branding. And next, our brains are actually pretty lazy. We want to solve problems as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. If we've got a problem, we just want to know the solution, and we want it to be the right solution. Branding can create little shortcuts to those solutions. That you kind of store these ideas of a brand in your head, and it forms the solution to a problem. For instance, if I'm on the road and I'm driving and I'm hungry, I know straight away the easiest solution for me is a drive-through McDonald's. I've just got that in my head, and that's where my brain goes. Or like I said earlier, my problem is I need a new pair of jeans. Straight away, the first thing that comes into my head is Levi's. So that's going to be the first place I go. And if nothing puts me off that idea, then that's probably where my money is going to be spent. So branding acts as like a little memory jog to providing solutions to our problems. I wanted to, this is just a slight sub-story just from my personal life, but last year my partner and I were buying our first house, and we do work here with Able Homes. I know a little bit about the new housing build companies in the area. My partner Lisa knows nothing, but she specifically wanted to go and look at a David Wilson home. She knew nothing about the homes. All she knew was there's a golden retriever in their logo, right? Possibly the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your life, the biggest investment of money, and my partner was basing her decision on they have a golden retriever in their logo. I trust them, I like them, their homes must be good. I don't think there's a better example of where branding plays a part in attracting customers than that. So I just wanted to slip that in there. That's a genuine story. I've not made that up. So just to highlight what I'm talking about here, would you trust this brand with your life savings? No. Would you shop here if you're on a tight budget for your family food shop?
No.
Probably not. Would you spend over £2,000 on a laptop that had this as their branding? Again, I'm guessing probably not. So that highlights why we're here. When designing a brand and branding, we don't just go to a magic book of logos and pick one out, as genuinely a client once asked us to do. They said, no, just go to your logo book and pick one out. That will be fine. That's not quite how it works. Your branding needs to represent your business. It needs to represent your values. It needs to work to get you noticed and create the right impression. So a lot of thought and consideration goes into these things in order for it to help you grow your business ultimately. So in summary, branding, it's what others say about you when you're not in the room. It's their thoughts, feelings about your business based on their own judgments and experiences. It's a set of memories. You can think of it as your reputation. Not something you're in control of, unfortunately, as nice as that would be, but you can do your very best to try and influence what those thoughts are. Branding, on the other hand, it's what we use to try and influence those thoughts and feelings. It's your look and feel. It's the set of assets, logos, colors, fonts that all create perceptions of your business. It can help you get noticed. It can help you stand out. It can provide shortcuts to solutions to your problems. Ultimately, it's the best way to develop the personality of your brand, to show your personality to people. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that just gives you a little bit of a background as to what we're talking about with brand and branding, and hopefully that's kind of undressed the differences. What I want to do next with all of you, and I'll need you to unmute your microphones for this bit because there's going to be a bit of involvement. What we're going to do is actually create a brand here and now.
That's good.
I've kind of simplified the process a bit, but I'm going to ask for everybody's input, and we're going to come up with a finished brand, and we're all going to decide whether we think it represents what we want it to. So let's design some branding. So who knows about the world of banking, and I call it traditional banking? You probably all recognise these brands in the world of banking. Very traditional organisations. They've been around for many, many years. Big corporate structures built on bricks and mortar. However, along come millennials, and suddenly, are the banks giving millennials what they want for their money? Are they providing the transparency, the convenience for managing their money 24/7 via their mobile? Are traditional banks able to do that?
Darling.
Yeah, exactly. So enter what we call challenger banks, the likes of Monzo, Revolut, Starling. There's plenty out there. These are probably the biggest three. They're digital first banks. They're no bricks and mortar. They're app based on your mobile. They're technology focused. So they are specifically aimed to millennials. That's who we want to get noticed by. What we're going to do is go back in time slightly. And we're going to invent the very first of the challenger banks, the digital first banks. It's going to be purely mobile phone based, web or app based. It's going to give our users the flexibility and transparency that the big banks can't. We've got a name. don't know what you think of the name, but I'll explain where it comes from. And here it is registered with Companies House. Okay, so when we look at it here, it doesn't really mean a lot, does it? It doesn't really tell us anything about it. The name is a mix of cash and dosh, but also hinting at the idea of speed, the idea of dashing. In its current form like this, it doesn't really show us anything. We need to bring it to life. We want to stand out. We don't want to look like any of these banks. We're deliberately different. We're digital, we're useful, we're modern. So we're going to deliberately differentiate ourselves from the market at the moment. So that's where I talk about branding being able to make you stand out and get noticed. So first of all, font. Fonts can have meaning, but mostly they're chosen on style and function. Our naked font, for instance, is deliberately loose, playful, kind of hints at that kind of creativity and our way of working. We're not corporate, basically. A modern and clean font will represent a modern and clean business and brand, whereas a traditional one, you'd find it hard to represent a modern, innovative business with a traditional, old-fashioned font. Some brands even have fonts developed specifically for them. So what we're looking at the moment in our marketplace, this is where we need to make a splash. This is where we need to get noticed. There's quite a few fairly traditional fonts, borderline sort of quite old-fashioned. Barclays, Nationwide, I'd say are very traditional styles. There's lots of all capital letters, this kind of authoritative, big business kind of feeling to it. Of all of them, Santander, I would say, is possibly the most modern, but just in the typeface, the logo as a whole is quite traditional. So what I'm going to do is show you 3 different options for font, and I'm just going to get your thoughts on each of them and which do you think is going to be best suited to Dash. Okay, so here's the first. Here's the second, and I'm going to show you. I'll show you all 3 together at the end. And they're deliberately black and white at this point because we've not covered colour yet. So we've got 3 options for font. Does anybody want to give an opinion as to which one they think suits best and why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not number 2.
Not number 2. Any reason why?
It's a bit boring.
Boring.
I'd go 1, but
I would go 1 as well. I see this as a slight lean and italicized there, so that is part of the Dash mentality, maybe.
I love number 1, but I think also number 3, millennials are into like the recycling and eco, and that's got that kind of earthy feel where it's just a print, so that's quite nice. But interestingly, on the modern logos that you showed as the millennials, they don't really have the name with the HSBC, or the traditional ones have their branding and their name, whereas those didn't. So you could almost get away with not having a font, couldn't you? And just a symbol.
In the examples I showed you earlier were just kind of the icon, the sort of symbol for each bank, and we will come to that. You've preempted a later stage, but the kind of full branding for those banks would have the name next to it. For instance, if you went on their website, you would see M and then Monzo next to it. Interesting what you say about the third one and that kind of idea. It's funny how you look at that and instantly you're thinking of kind of eco and recycling and sustainability because of that earthy feel to it. The one thing I would say about option 3 is how well that would reproduce at very small sizes on screen might cause us problems.
Also, on the background, I think it will be hard to read because on the white, it's a little bit tricky. So depending on what colour background, you'd almost want a colour or something to make it pop. While the first one, you can put it on any background and you would clearly be able to see it and it would be easy to read.
Yeah.
Sorry, I butted in.
No, it's
The
good.
first-
That's great.
The first one, all I can think of is Dyson. I know it's just the font, but as soon as you put that up, I like the speed, but then my head went to Dyson. And so now I'm like, I can't get that out of my head.
That's actually very similar to Dyson's font. You're right. I hadn't thought of that, but actually it is. Yeah. Yeah, now I'm thinking about it. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, because Dyson is all about innovation and technology and, you know, future development, that sort of thing. And actually that fits in quite well with what we're trying to do here with our bank.
Okay, yeah, because they are ultimately the top, well, they've got Shark and things against them now, but they have been like the top brand and sellers, haven't they, of vacuums and things for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Angela, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry. I agree with number one, only because of that forward facing slant on the actual, and you could probably raise the H up a little bit as well to kind of really make it going a bit further forward. Yeah, I like that, moving forward.
So I'm sensing that people are leaning towards number one, which is great. That's what I hoped would happen. A couple of things. I find the eco idea really interesting with the third one. And I think if we were developing a bank with a very strong sustainability focus and that is our differentiator, if you like, that is a strong value, then I think that would work. I think in this instance, we're purely focusing on the idea of the technology and being able to get to your money quickly and 24/7. I would go with number one. I also think that the all lowercase is quite familiar with the sort of technology brands that we all know of. Airbnb, for instance, Amazon is all lowercase. It seems to be sort of a bit of an association with the tech brands is to have all lowercase. Number two, all uppercase. We saw the traditional banks kind of adopting this. It's very authoritarian. It's very traditional. And the typeface chosen is deliberately really traditional. That's maybe, you know, when you say boring, that is maybe where that's coming from. It's that sort of tradition. It doesn't look very modern or technology focused. And also I would say about that one, thin typefaces are quite hard to recreate on digital devices. We've seen recently quite a few fashion brands, Prada, I think, being one of them. They've redesigned their branding because they were finding that their branding wasn't recreating very well on screens, and much more people are shopping via the screen now. So they've gone with this almost more towards number one, where it's chunky, it's bold, and it's easily seen. So we're going to go with number one, unless anybody strongly disagrees. That's the font we want to develop. So let's move on. Let's think about colour. Now, certain colours can mean certain things to different people, but there's some general feelings towards colours. Red, for instance, Virgin. Red, used for excitement. It's daring, it's adventurous. It can symbolise power or even danger, and it can also be linked to wealth and that sort of thing. So we saw quite a few banks using red. Pink can be quite feminine, it can be sensitive, quite calming, health related, which works well for vitality. Dark blue, navies, they're very traditional, it's very trusted, dependable, authority. Perfect for someone like British Gas. It's a big, trusted institution. Although my experience with British Gas is a bit different, but hey. Light blue is kind of innovative. It's freedom. You think of the sky. So a few tech brands like Twitter will use light blue. Skype, for instance. green is quite fresh, it's quite peaceful, it's about health and growth. You know, when we're thinking about health, perfect for HelloFresh. Purple, creative, imaginative, quite luxurious, so works quite well for Cadbury's with that luxurious chocolate. And yellow and orange is kind of all about life and optimism and vibrancy. And IKEA is all about bringing great design to everyday life. So that works well for IKEA. Colour can be quite subjective. It can be quite interesting sometimes when you're trying to recommend some branding for somebody, and you know that maybe navy blue is the perfect option for them because it's going to create that trust and authority, but they just don't like navy blue. And you try and say, well, we're not designing it for you, we're designing it, you know, for your customers. But it's, at the end of the day, if you don't like a colour, you don't like a colour, and there are ways around it. So let's just have a quick look again at our marketplace. This is what we're going to do lots when we're creating brands, is look at who we're up against. And we can see there's a bit of a blue wash, as you'd expect, really, that whole authoritarian, that whole trusted thing. You know, the biggest thing for a bank when they're looking after your money is trust. It's kind of what we'd expect. There's the reds as well. I mentioned about the link to wealth, some purples, blacks, greens. It's all quite classic, deep shades. There's nothing really unexpected there. The only one, I suppose, which is slightly different is Yorkshire Building Society. We've got kind of a bright green, which my eye is drawn to, and also AIB, that pink. So those two kind of stand out amongst the crowd. So again, I'm going to go through 3 options of colour palette, and then I'm going to show you a summary at the end. So this is the first one, it's quite bright and vibrant. This is the second one, quite muted. And this is the third one, I would say quite traditional. So any thoughts there as to what we think is going to be the best colour palette for us to develop for our brand Dash?
Number 1.
Yeah. Any reason?
No, just the colour, the orange is more, just go straight to it.
Yeah, it's kind of energetic. It feels that vibrancy. We can see it working. Do you think? What about number 3? Are there any thoughts on number 3?
Dull.
Dull. Yeah.
Oh dear. Sorry, I'm dyslexic and I have visual disturbance. So for me, the colours, I haven't got any reasons behind it, but the colours I'm like with the Dash, the first one, the bold, it went straight there because I normally have yellow background. But the orange, I like colours, so I'll just choose by colour.
Well, and that's a perfect example. You know, but colours, people are drawn to colours, and people interpret colours differently. Does anybody else have any thoughts on our colour palettes?
Yeah, I do. There's 2 of you here that have heard me talk around personality. So for me, that number 1, because as you've well and truly hinted at, our personalities, according to Carl Jung, are attached to a colour. So if you miss one out, blue being the dependable accountancy, then you move through to red where you're sort of more proactive, and then you've got, you know, your greens for, and then yellow sunshine. So for me, that 1 would encompass everything. And there is no variation between young people at all. So if you're looking at a millennial market, I personally, as a psychologist, would go for number 1.
Perfect. Well,
I would on 1, I'd probably possibly even swap primary with secondary and have the orange as the primary and the dark blue as a secondary, if anything. But keep that palette.
So with 1, I think we've kind of got that backdrop of the blue and the kind of trust and dependable, but then we complement it or contrast it with a bright, vibrant, energetic orange, which, like I say, works perfectly for our audience. So I think number 1 in this instance is the way forward. So we've got a font, we've got a color, so we're making progress. What about icons and symbols? We briefly touched on it. Touched on it earlier. Hayes, with so those modern banks, they have a symbol. When we think of Nike, the swoosh, some icons and symbols get so popular that they become iconic in themselves, and they can be used to communicate a story behind a brand. So, does anybody recognise these three brands?
Toblerone,
Adidas,
Audi.
Yeah.
So Toblerone, this is their icon. This is part of their logo. It communicates a story behind their brand. Can anyone see the bear in the Toblerone logo?
Yes.
So the bear is deliberately there because Toblerone was created in a city called I think it's Bern. I might not be pronouncing that right, but it's known as the City of Bears. And it also alludes to the fact that there's a unique taste of honey in the Toblerone chocolate. So just that icon can communicate, can tell a story about that brand. Adidas, the three stripes, deliberately in that sloping style to represent a mountain and kind of the challenge that athletes face with improving their performance. And then the Audi rings are to represent the four individual companies that came together to form the original Audi. So there can be stories behind brands and behind their logos. So we're going to show, you're probably familiar with the format now. I'm going to show you three different icons to choose from, and then we're going to talk about them in the summary. So this is the first one. Second one is no icon, just text, and this is the third one. Any thoughts at this stage? What do you think is going to be best for an icon for Dash?
The first one and the third one have nothing to do with Dash, what we've talked about. So the D isn't in the font, so it doesn't even look like it belongs to Dash. And the crown makes no sense.
Why does it make no sense?
I don't know. Well, you associate a crown with royalty, that kind of thing, and that isn't what this is about. This is a bank account that's about freedom and stepping away from other banks and that kind of format, and that doesn't say, if anything, that's going back to that.
Yeah. Great. Does anybody disagree with Hayes?
I would go with the third one because it just looks different, and that's what you're saying. The millennials want something different.
Yeah. What about number two? Any thoughts on number two?
Yeah, I like number two. I like all the rounded corners as well.
Yeah.
With a bit of security there, that looks good.
Yeah.
Dash is associated, so you're doing some, as you said, is without changing stuff too much. You've got an incremental association with the font. So yeah, I like that.
Anybody else have any thoughts at this stage? So I knew this one would be quite interesting because I had a feeling that people would be quite drawn to number two, which is no icon as such. It is just our font. Now, whereas I could see this working in most instances, but when we're thinking about our digital bank and it's going to exist on mobile phones predominantly as an app, which is why I've shown it in these rounded corner boxes, because it best represents kind of the app symbol that we might see it as. I would say that number two is going to be quite hard to read at very small sizes. So where it would work in some instances, I think our primary use as an app symbol, we might be struggling to read it really. And I think we need something that's a bit simpler and a bit stronger to kind of jump out at us as just a symbol, a unique symbol that when we see it, we know that it's for Dash rather than actually writing Dash. completely agree, Hayes, with your comments on the crown. That's exactly why it's in there. You think royalty, you think tradition, and it's moving back to that traditional bank. It's not the way we want to go. It doesn't represent our brand very well. When I look at that, it could be an online casino or something. I think just that's where my head goes. So what I'm going to suggest is, and I'm glad that this was said, that the third one actually, although it doesn't look identical to the font that we chose, it is quite unique. It's quite different. It has that kind of slightly edgy feel. We've still got the slanted italic feel to it. And it's going to be very easily read at small sizes. So I'm going to recommend that we go with that one. Imagery. So constantly a consistent style of imagery can be used to represent brands. We saw Red Bull earlier with the adverts. Sometimes you can see imagery that's so unique that you don't need any branding on it. You instantly know it's associated with that brand. So it's just as important to choose the right imagery as it is fonts, colors, icons, that sort of thing. So I'm going to show 3 styles of image again. And I want to just get your quick thoughts on what you think suits us best. So, so these are the 3 different types of image. I'll show you a summary. Any thoughts there as to the sort of style that we think could work quite well for Dash?
Number 3, the rocket one.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm number 1.
Yeah. And any kind of, what is it about number 3 or number 1 that you think works well for our brand?
Again, I'm just going by the colours. It's different. Rocket, takeoff. Dash is like kind of fast.
Yeah.
For me, it's probably because you're selling a lifestyle brand, aren't you? And that's the market. That couple, they're the ones you want to be buying into this bank.
Mm-hmm.
I went to 3 straight away because the colours are there, and it's very there's actually, you've gone from having a photograph to just images, and naturally our brain goes to that and understands it. Number 2 isn't really targeting the right market, though cool that they're wanting to go online with their banking. Number 1, the whole black and white thing, I think it's going a little bit more to the black and white is like the higher end sort of market. I know the picture, ultimately shows a couple using their phone, but there's not that sort of like freedom, trendy, sort of fast pace to the image.
Yeah.
Like number 3 is. Sorry, number 1 to number 3. Yeah.
So you've said everything there that I would have said. So that's perfect. Number 1, it is our target audience. It is lifestyle. There's not much wrong with it, to be honest with you. The black and white is deliberate. It's deliberately black and white because, like you say, it kind of maybe has that slightly more premium kind of traditional feel to it. And in this instance, I don't think it would. When we kind of look for the long-term scope of it using imagery for our brand, I just don't think this gives us enough. Number 2, perfect. It's not our target audience. These, the people that we're showing, they're too old. We're aiming at a younger market. So even though we've given the image a bit of treatment by using the orange color to highlight the technology, but this is just not our market. Number 3, it's colorful, it's youthful, it's vibrant, and it gives us fantastic scope for building the brand beyond just one image. You're going to need lots of imagery to build this brand, and this kind of illustrative style really helps us do that with better scope. So next part is tone of voice and slogans, messaging, sometimes referred to as the verbal identity. So everything we've looked at so far is the visual part of your identity. This is the verbal part. Branding doesn't stop at the visual stuff. we use words to create judgments and perceptions. Words tell stories, and words are probably the best way to build a personality of a brand. In order to portray our brand in the right way, it has to speak in the right way too. So kind of what we say and how we say it is what we're talking about here. One of the best examples of this, I mentioned them earlier, is Innocent Drinks. Their tone of voice is their branding single-handedly define them in the marketplace. But at the end of the day, they're all everybody's selling fruit smoothies. Fundamentally, they're the same thing. They're blended fruit in a bottle. But Innocent has such a strong branding, such a strong tone of voice that they are market leaders for that. And that's a perfect example of the power of branding, really. And a really good example of a good tone of voice. They've got this sort of playful, human tone of voice to their packaging, which has actually started a trend amongst other brands that want to do that. We have quite a few people come to us and say, "Oh, we want to sound like Innocent," and so okay. So what we're going to concentrate on is our strap line. So I'm going to show you 3 options, and from this strap line, we'll get an idea of our tone of voice, and we've really started to build our personality for Dash now. So option 2, option 3, and so these are our 3 options. Any thoughts there as to what these say to you in terms of A, the message, and B, the kind of tone that it's set in?
I'll go with number 1 because the other 2 are sort of similar to what you'd normally say, whereas number 1's different, and I just like it. You know, it's going to be heaven if you bank with them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Doreen.
Any agree with Doreen?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Agree. Did someone say they agree with Doreen?
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of fits the image as well of the rocket going up to the sky. It's going up to heaven.
Yeah.
It's a bit too serious.
So every single word's got a really full-on meaning. 24/7, banking, heaven.
Yeah.
And all 3 put together say it all. So each word has got a meaning, hasn't it?
Yeah. And when we're looking at our market against our traditional banks, no other bank can say that. I would say no other bank could sit there and claim 24/7 banking heaven, because that's just not the way their business works. Whereas I would say our competitors could use the better way to bank, and they could use personal and business finance. So with the strap line, with messaging, we're always looking to say what our competitors can't, because that's going to help establish us against them. So yeah, number 1, it's short, it's snappy. Every single word in it is powerful, and it's the nice little rhyme is kind of an added bonus. It's probably not what you'd expect tone of voice of a bank to say. So they're some of the different elements we've looked at, and we've brought them together. Who wants to see what the final thing looks like? Yeah. Okay. So this is Dash, right? This is our business. We've now created the branding for our modern bank. What does everyone think?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah.
We launch.
Sorry?
When do we launch?
Next week. We'll be millionaires.
Brilliant. Let's go.
But I think this is a really good example where obviously I've simplified the process. I've had to for the sake of this, but it just goes to show the kind of consideration that goes into each element to bring it together and to try and create something that portrays the right impression of our brand and our business. I don't know if you all agree, but I think this sort of visual style and this tone of voice perfectly suits our millennial audience. I I think the branding, the whole fact that it's kind of slanted and it's bright and vibrant, it perfectly represents what we're about, and it's functional as well. Like I said, with using it digitally, so it ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
If we'd have gone a slightly different way, we might. Oh, this was just showing it. Sorry, this was just showing.
Oh, okay.
In amongst the others, and just showing how it actually stands out amongst everybody else. And if we'd have chosen some slightly different options, we might have come back with this, which I don't know about everybody else, but that doesn't really fill me with much
My
excitement.
dad would love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe if our bank was maybe if it was a digital bank, but it was being created for an older market that wanted to feel a bit safer and a bit more secure in this whole sort of slightly scary world of digital banking, maybe this would be the way to go.
It looks like Coots, doesn't it? It looks like Coots Bank.
Yes, exactly. So that's our kind of branding exercise, really. Hopefully you all agree that it looks relevant to the audience, and it would create the right impression, and it would provide a firm footing for us to build our brand. So, you know, obviously experiences of customers and that sort of thing would all help to build that impression of Dash as being a modern, innovative, 24/7 banking heaven. Any thoughts or questions at this point? Do we all feel like we've taken something away from that? Does anybody feel like they might look at their brand differently after that? Or
Dan, I've got a question for you. Dan, when you came up with the 24/7 banking heaven words, to get to that point with a company, you go through an exercise of looking at your USPs and all the keywords that your business represents and trying to analyze and then break it all down? You start with a kind of a mass amount of words and try and get into succinct what the key things are. Is that how you get to that?
Yeah, exactly that. So there's two questions we want to find out fundamentally when we're doing branding for somebody. It's, who do you want to be noticed by? So who's your audience? And what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want them to remember you for? And once we get to that answer to that question of what do you want to be remembered for, we can then, like you say, build a whole list of key messages that are going to come out of that. And then you kind of have to narrow it down again to one single strap line, which is going to encompass all of it. So, like you say, it's coming up with it's opening a box of information and then trying to narrow it down to just one thing that's going to work for that business and represents them well. So we do workshops with people to kind of really get down to what's under the bonnet of their brand. What really lives at the heart of them, what their sort of purpose is, if you like, what makes them special, and then from that we can start to make suggestions of how they look and how they sound and the sort of things they should be saying to their desired audience.
Yeah, because one of the challenges I have as a business is that I sit in the business consumer world and the business to business procurement world under one kind of brand, and I have to do the messages and marketing and everything else we put out has to be kind of unified, but also it's completely, we've got completely two different audiences where they're different sized companies, different consumers, different ages, different parts of the country, different, and it's an ongoing challenge we have under one kind of brand.
Yeah.
But it's interesting and we're trying to reshape that with our USPs and what we stand for and everything else, but it's an ongoing dialogue we have in the office about these messages that we put out there, because it's hard to have one message in such a big market. But
yeah, it's hard to cover all your bases with one message, especially you're in the tricky situation of where you've got a B2B audience and a B2C audience.
Yeah.
and often those two things need very different messaging, because like you say, they're looking for different things. So in that instance where you're trying to do that with just one brand, it can be quite tricky unless you can land on something that kind of that is quite broad.
Yeah.
Whereas you might have a B2B brand that's specific for B2B and has a very different tone of voice and message, and then you might create a B2C brand which has a very slightly different look and feel, but that's because it's a different market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Those two questions I said, who do you want to be noticed by and what do you want to be remembered for? The answers are going to be different probably for your B2B brand as they are to your B2C brand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, they are. Yeah. Good.
Is anybody else? I appreciate we're past 11 o'clock, but so if anybody needs to go, obviously go. But if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to make a comment. I think that's excellent, and I think if you're whether you're a startup, you're well into business. Do you remember the BBC changed their logo just slightly, and that made a huge difference? And I think just going through the rigors and discipline of this, maybe once a year, to have a look through is excellent. I think is again, Dan, from me, an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. That's very kind. I've got one more slide, which feel free to take a screenshot or jot them down, or I can send them to you. But like you say, once a year, it might be worth just running through all of these questions and just sanity checking whether you think your branding represents your business and your brand in the right way. What do you want your business to be remembered for? Do you know what you're saying and how you portray your business in the right way? I think one of the most important ones on here, and I know Sarah is aware of this one. Do you know what your customers think about your brand? That's a really important one, because like I was saying earlier, your brand is really in the heads of your customers. You might want it to stand for something completely different, but unless you're doing the work to change their thoughts and feelings, it's not going to. So actually having an understanding of what your customers think about your brand can really help you define your communication. So yeah, if there was one on there that would be my key question, it would be that one.
I think also what's interesting is if you were starting again now, would you do it differently? As Steve said, so many businesses have had to change and evolve. And obviously, because the pandemic has changed so much, that's a really important question to think, actually, what would we do differently? Is it working? But they're things you should be asking constantly.
We're speaking to lots of businesses, and so many of them are taking this time to really look at themselves and what they stand for. Do a bit of what I call navel gazing. Actually, why are we here? What do we actually bring to people? How can we really make a difference? I think that's a theme that we're seeing a lot amongst businesses during this pandemic. We've even done it ourselves, actually, at Naked. We spent a lot of time actually really getting to the heart of what Naked is about. I think through that, we've emerged in a stronger position, actually. So as doom and gloom as there has been during this pandemic for lots and lots of businesses, there have been some positives to come out of it from our point of view, and luckily we've had the good fortune to be able to help some other businesses with that as well. So but yeah, it is interesting at the moment with the world of brands and branding, especially with the kind of, a lot of brands are wanting to be able to give more to their community. I think people are kind of almost looking to brands to do that a bit more at the moment. So there's a lot more kind of CSR and actually what we're doing. So is what we're doing really benefiting our local community?
So important.
So thank you, everybody. Any other questions, feel free to drop me an email. I'm more than happy to give more information about anything I've talked about here, or send over the presentation, or anything. Just drop me an email or give me a call. And yeah, I'll happily chat to any of you. I really appreciate you coming on the workshop and listening to me and helping me design a multi-million-pound business that we're going to take forward.
So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for attending. Dan will share the presentation with me and I'll share it out with everyone, and I'll include his contact details. Well, you can see him on the last slide, but I'll also CC him into the email as well. So just to double check, is everyone happy for the recording to be shared? Although I probably do need to check for copyright reasons, considering so many brands were included. But I just want to check if anyone had anything against the recording going up, if I'm allowed to do it. So just perfect. And then one other thing, I know we're running late, so I'm just going to be quick. I just want to do a social media post. So does anyone have anything wrong with me quickly taking a screen grab? Is that okay with everyone? I did try and do it during the workshop, but everyone looks like they're bored, and I know they weren't bored during the
I'm tired.
I'm sorry, I'm blunt, I'm honest, and the picture doesn't communicate how much you enjoyed the session. So I am going to get you to smile. Dan, I didn't know if you wanted which backdrop you wanted, if you wanted the question mark, if you wanted the branding, which slide you wanted in the background. I don't know.
Should we have this one?
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be great. But I wanted to check because someone might come along and steal it. I don't know. I wanted to check what your.
We'll copyright it just in case. No, I think we're safe.
Okay. Can you? Is there any way to move it? Because I can't get everyone in. Is there a way to move the presentation to the left a bit?
That way?
No, other way. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah, there.
There?
Hang on. Go right a bit more. Bit more, bit more. So you can, bit more, bit more. Tiny bit, there, stop. Right. So everyone, smile, look like you're having a great time. In 3, 2, 1, go. Yay! Right. Sorry, I know we're massively over time, but I just thought this would be a really great social media post. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I will share the presentation with you today. And as Dan said, if you've got any questions, feel free to contact him. He'll be more than happy to answer your questions and help you in any way you can. So yeah,
Brilliant.
thanks.
Oh, it's really good to see everyone. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you
Thank you,
later.
Dan. That was very interesting. I like the imagery thing because I've just got imagery on my banner and I wasn't too sure if but I like it. Everything is confirmed, so it's brilliant. Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear that. Glad to hear it. I'm pleased that it's been helpful in some way.